After the vacation is over, Ben begins to be hunted by a telepathic alien who wants to steal the power of the Omnitrix. Today we're going to recap the story of the 2007 movie, Ben 10, Race Against Time. In the center of Bellwood, a mysterious villain begins to destroy the stores and cars parked around him, which ends up drawing the attention of Ben, who appears transformed into the heat blast to put an end to the enemy. As it's the middle of the night, Ben complains and asks if they can't do it the next day. But as the villain doesn't answer, he decides to start the action and throws a fireball in the mysterious enemy's face, causing him to fly out and through a store window. After the first attack, Heat Blast tries to fly towards the villain to deliver the final blow, but ends up being captured by a blast of energy that traps him in a giant bubble. After a few seconds, the object bursts and Ben flies into a garbage can. As soon as he gets up, the police arrive and ask them to stand down, but when Heat Blast tries to say that everything is under control, several goons show up and start fighting the officers. Realizing that they don't stand a chance, Ben creates a fire barrier to separate the two groups and begins to face the alien soldiers alone, knocking them all out with extreme ease. Finally, Heat Blast launches a powerful blast of fire that sets the villain in the astronaut's helmet on fire and then disappears. Even though he finds it strange, Ben has nothing else to do there and extinguishes the fire barrier. Far away, the transformation ends and Ben returns to his original form just as Grandpa Max and Gwen arrive to talk to him. Thinking the fight isn't over yet, Ben suggests continuing to hunt down the other henchmen, but Max replies that it's better to leave it for another time and go home before the cops suspect they're doing something wrong. Despite his annoyance, Ben accepts his grandfather's advice and returns to his normal routine, going to school the next morning. As soon as he arrives at the place, Tennyson finds two girls talking about the Heat Blast sightings and tries to join in the conversation, but neither pays any attention and they simply leave. In the stairwell, Gwen is taking photos of the students for the yearbook when Ben appears by surprise in front of the camera. After being photographed, the boy starts talking about the villains they faced and Gwen tells him that he should forget about it, because summer vacation is over and now they should live like normal kids. Trying to do what she says, Ben strives to look like an ordinary student, but he doesn't manage to stand out at all and ends up being targeted by bullies who stick chewing gum on his locker door. While he's cleaning up with some papers, the bullies show up and start teasing Ben, who takes his revenge by throwing the sheets of chewing gum in their direction. To his misfortune, the boys swerve at the last second and he ends up hitting Principal White right in the face, landing him in detention. After a disastrous first day at school, Ben goes to the rust bucket where his grandfather is testing a laser weapon in the shape of a wrench. Tired of trying to live a normal life, the boy asks them to leave and says he prefers his life as a hero, suggesting he tell everyone who he really is. Max then replies that it's best to leave things as they are and tells him that he must go back to living a normal life, as well as keeping his identity a secret at all costs. Despite his annoyance, Ben accepts his grandfather's order and returns to his parents' house. Far away, the villain in the space helmet asks his henchmen if they can find Ben and is furious when he finds out they can't, attacking one of the aliens who falls lifeless. After calming down, the alien orders the soldiers to return to the search mission and uses his powers to get a glimpse of space, locating an entire fleet of alien ships that are approaching. Unaware of the approaching alien army, Ben returns to school where he once again tries to fit in with the other students, this time by applying for the talent show. Curious, the girls ask what he can do and Tennyson almost uses the Omnitrix, but Gwen arrives in time to stop him, telling him to put the watch away for the magic show. Confused, the girls ask if they are illusionists and Gwen confirms it, saying that Ben is her assistant and that the two of them will be performing at the talent show. After almost revealing his identity, Ben decides to go to Mrs. Dalton's restaurant for a snack, but while talking to the woman, he notices a strange symbol on the cash register. After some time trying to identify it, Ben gives up and, looking around, sees a gentleman reading a news item about the wild mutt and asks to see it. While he's reading the article, the gum duo in the locker appear and start teasing him, saying that Wildmutt is Ben's new girlfriend. After the boys have sat down at a table, Tennyson leaves the restaurant determined to get revenge and starts tinkering with the Omnitrix, looking for an alien to help him on his mission. After a while, he decides to turn into gray matter and returns to the restaurant, taking advantage of its tiny size to turn off the power and sabotage the wiring of all the machines. With that done, gray matter turns on the circuit breaker which automatically activates the machines, making the display spin so fast that it rains pies on everyone, especially the bullies. After completing his revenge, Ben goes to La Vella where he finds Gwen editing the photos for the yearbook. When he sees the boy notices that there is a stain on his side and asks his cousin to fix it. To do this, Gwen passes the photo to other software, and when she does, she discovers that the masked villain from the night before was hiding in the blur. Confused, Ben says that he melted this enemy and Gwen says that he must have escaped, and that to make matters worse, he knows the true identity of the Omnitrix bearer. While they are discussing the possible intentions of the enemy, Grandpa Max appears and, as soon as he sees the photo on the notebook, says that this is Eon, an old acquaintance of the intergalactic police who, 2 centuries ago, was the first alien to be captured by the plumbers. Max then says that according to the records, Eon was almost eliminated and still fought to protect a device he called the Hands of Armageddon, and that the plumbers only discovered what it was decades later. According to Grandpa Max, the Hands of Armageddon is a doomsday weapon, an artifact capable of opening a dimensional portal and initiating an alien invasion capable of wiping out the human race. Now that he knows what they're up against, Max tells his grandchildren to pack their things because they need to get back on the road, which makes Ben extremely happy. While traveling, Max tries to call the Plumbers Research Center and gets no answer, which worries him. When they arrive, the leader of the plumbers opens the gate and enters the base, which is apparently abandoned. As soon as they pass through the entrance, Max explains that they were doing research into aliens and their technologies. Upon hearing this, Gwen asks if there shouldn't be plumbers around and Max confirms it, starting a search of the whole place. After some time walking around, they notice smoke coming from one of the doors and decide to go in to investigate, discovering that the place is completely destroyed. Wanting to understand what happened, Max wanders around the site looking for Jacobs, the man in charge of protecting the base, but when they manage to locate him, they realize that the man's body has aged considerably, taking on a cadaverous appearance. Thinking he's eliminated, Ben starts to move his body until Jacobs wakes up and grabs his wrist, giving him such a fright that he ends up ripping the poor guy's arm off. After the shock, Jacobs says that it was Eon who did it and that he is looking for the Hands of Armageddon, so they need to stop him from getting to the warehouse, which is where all the artifacts are kept. Seeing the Omnitrix bearer, Jacobs says that Eon knows who he is and is after him, which Ben finds strange as he had never seen the villain before the fight that night. While Ben processes the information, Jacobs ends up losing his life and they must continue on their mission to find Eon. Knowing what the enemy's objective is, Ben asks if they can go to the warehouse and Max accepts, taking his grandchildren to the rust bucket to start the journey. After a while, they arrive at a building materials store and Ben asks if it's some kind of joke, but Max denies it, showing him the secret that activates the elevator, giving access to the plumber's HQ underground. As soon as he enters the place, Ben sees the same symbol as the cash register and says that this is all over Bellwood. Grandpa Max then says that this is the symbol of the plumbers and tells them it's time for them to meet the team. At that moment, Mrs. Dalton and Principal White appear and apologize for never having revealed their identity before, saying that they were undercover to keep them safe. After the revelation, Max decides to take them to the artifact and goes with the whole team there, where Ben asks why they never destroyed the portal. When she hears this, Mrs. Dalton replies that they tried, but somehow their hands always repelled them, dissipating so much energy that it even created the Grand Canyon. Director White then says that after many attempts, they gave up on destroying the artifact and began to protect it, fighting Eon for several years. But now, the plumbers are old and far fewer in number than before. Upon hearing this, Ben says that he is the hero they need and offers to defeat Eon. While the plumbers think about it, the villain invades the facility with his alien army and everyone has to fight to defend themselves, including Ben. To help him, the plumbers go to the armory and get some weapons to neutralize the invaders, but even armed, the retired soldiers go after the aliens using ordinary tools and are easily defeated. While everyone is fighting, Eon teleports close to the Hands of Armageddon and tries to use his powers to activate it, but for some reason, nothing happens. Frustrated, the villain looks at Ben, who is choosing an alien in the Omnitrix, teleports close to him and picks him up, taking him outside without anyone noticing. On the streets, Eon touches the Omnitrix, which changes color and flashes purple. Desperate, Ben manages to land an elbow that causes the Mega Purple to release him, but when he tries to use the watch to transform, he realizes that it is no longer working. Completely helpless, the boy runs away and gets on a bicycle to escape, but Eon keeps after him, using his powers to control a car to chase him. In this way, the villain manages to trap Ben in an alley to which he teleports. Alone with the boy, Eon explains that his race is able to manipulate time, which is why he was able to distort its molecules to make Ben have an illusion when they first met. Now that they're alone, Eon says he needs the Omnitrix to re-establish his race and Ben refuses to hand it over. The alien advances towards him to take it by force. Just then, the man from the diner appears with a plumber's gun and shoots the villain in the shoulder, forcing him to teleport away. After saving him, the old man says that Ben should take his chance and go home as soon as possible, and that's what he does. In his room, Tennyson tries to lie down when he is surprised by his grandfather. Frightened, the boy tells him everything that has happened and reveals that Eon has managed to make the Omnitrix stop working, but when he analyzes the object, Max realizes that everything is already okay. After checking the watch, the leader of the plumbers says that Eon needs the object to power the Hands of Armageddon and asks his grandson to leave town, but Ben obviously refuses and offers to hunt down the villain with the plumbers. Left with no options, Max accepts and says that he will leave the other plumbers on watch to help him, putting everyone on the outskirts of the school the next morning. Frustrated, Ben complains to Gwen that Eon will never show up and that he will never be able to defeat him. To solve this problem, the boy decides to go to the court, which is completely empty, but he ends up being followed by Principal White, who realizes that something is wrong and offers to help. With the excuse of wanting to be alone, Ben manages to get the man to leave, but just as he is about to leave, time starts to rewind and White is thrown away. Suddenly, the Omnitrix turns violet again and Ben tries to run for the exit, but ends up being captured by Eon, who tries to take his Omnitrix. Desperate, the boy activates the fire alarm and takes the opportunity to hit the villain in the ribs, using the watch to transform himself into the Diamond Head. Now that he can use his powers, Ben is able to defend himself against Eon's temporal projectiles and hits back with the Diamond Head shards that throw the enemy away. After receiving the blow, Eon stands up and says that since he activated the alarm, the other students will soon be on the court too. Worried that the others will see him, Ben looks back and the villain takes the opportunity to teleport away, forcing the boy to hide in the girls' changing room until the transformation has passed. Together with the other students, Gwen arrives on the court and notices Eon's trail and the Diamond Head crystals, heading for the changing room door to wait for her cousin. When his transformation is complete, Ben comes out of the bathroom and tells Gwen that he will do what Eon wants, deciding to face him alone. To do this, the boy goes to a square in the center of town where he ends up being surprised by Grandpa Max. Seeing his grandchildren alone, the man asks what they are doing and Gwen tells him about her cousin's plan, which makes her grandfather furious. After telling his grandchildren what a stupid idea it was, Max calls everyone to the rust bucket, but the motor home is blown up before they can get inside. Just then, Eon's alien soldiers appear and capture the Tennyson family, taking them all to the warehouse in the plumber's HQ. There, Ben wakes up and realizes that everyone is hanging by chains. Just then, Eon appears and Max tries to convince him to free his grandchildren, saying that he can keep the Omnitrix if he wants. Finding the proposal ridiculous, the villain responds with a blast of energy that almost cracks his skull. After almost knocking out his grandfather, Eon goes to his grandson and asks him if he knows why the Omnitrix transformation only lasts 10 minutes, revealing that this is because of the watch's security system, which prevents the alien DNA from overriding the user's gene. The villain then says that he can easily break this system and that he will do so in order to take over Ben's body. Eon explains that since he appeared on Earth 200 years ago, every time he uses his temporal powers, his body becomes weaker. Therefore, he intends to take control of Ben and take advantage of his potential to activate Armageddon, opening the portal to bring all his kind to conquer the Earth. Taking advantage of the fact that the boy is chained up, Eon begins to tinker with the Omnitrix and makes Ben transform into it, but unlike his current form, which is already weakened, the new version is much younger and more powerful. Seeing his clone, the old version of Eon thanks Ben for his sacrifice and says that there can't be two variations of a person in the same world, then disappears. Now that they are alone, Gwen tries to talk to her cousin to ask for help, but Eon replies that Ben no longer exists and that he is now free to take over the Earth. With his powers restored, the villain reactivates the Hands of Armageddon, which begin to glow wildly, causing all the alien aircraft to appear in space near the Earth. While Eon is absent-mindedly opening the portal, Max asks Gwen to use her feet to push the wrench and that's what the girl does. With the tool aimed at the chains, Gwen triggers the mechanism that fires the laser beam, freeing her grandfather and allowing him to release her. Finally releasing her, Max asks his granddaughter to hide while he tries to find a way to deactivate the portal. To do this, the leader of the plumbers takes a high-voltage cable and gives Eon a huge shock to the chest, as well as using his own body to make the electricity flow through the artifact and prevent Armageddon. As soon as she finds out that her grandfather is willing to sacrifice himself, Gwen starts talking to Ben inside Eon's body, trying to convince him to help, but this doesn't work and the villain continues to advance towards her, knocking the Griffin key out of her hand while saying that those were his last words. Just as he's about to finish her, the retired plumbers arrive to help, but like all good extras, they are easily disarmed by the villain's henchmen and are left completely defenseless. With no one else to stop him, Eon prepares for the final blow while Gwen keeps trying to talk to Ben, which ends up awakening his cousin's consciousness and causes him to regain control of his own body, starting an internal conflict. After a brief struggle, Ben manages to control his body and uses Eon's powers to eliminate his soldiers, freeing the plumbers. With that done, the boy uses the Omnitrix to return to his human form and goes to his grandfather to help him, teaming up with the plumbers to get him out of the portal. As soon as Max disconnects the cables, the artifact is deactivated and the spaceships disappear from the sky, returning to their own dimension. After the battle, Ben starts walking towards the group of plumbers when he realizes that everyone has stopped in time. Suddenly, the old version of Eon appears and grabs the boy, throwing him hard against a wall. To avoid the impact, Ben transforms into the Wild Mutt and manages to land on the pipe, all while dodging the blasts that Eon uses to attack him. Even in his animal version, Ben manages to dodge the projectiles and lands a headbutt that sends the villain flying. Immediately after being hit, Eon fires a blast in Gwen's direction, forcing the boy to drop everything to save her. Even with little time, the Wild Mutt swings around like Tarzan and manages to get his cousin out of the way in time, landing behind the villain with the girl still on his lap. To end the fight, the bearer of the Omnitrix hits Eon so hard that he slams him into the portal, breaking the artifact, which disappears along with the villain. After the fight, the Tennysons go to the school talent show and Max turns off the power so that no one can see his grandson. After a dance performance by a group of girls, the hostess appears to announce the last show and calls the Tennyson cousins. Totally out of control, Besta appears in the middle of the stage and leaves everyone terrified. Right behind him, Gwen also appears and does everything she can to distract the audience until the 10 minutes of the transformation have passed. When time is almost up, the Omnitrix symbol starts flashing red and Gwen says that her big trick, a transformation, will now take place. She then covers the Wild Mutt with a curtain and waits for a few seconds until Ben comes out from under the cloth in his human form, which leaves everyone impressed, even the bullies. Despite this great trick, the cousins fail to win the talent show and come in second. But now, what matters most is that they are real plumbers and have managed to save the world. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.